An employee walks into the owner's office and says, "I can't believe you hired another sales manager from the outside. I've worked here for 6 years, have built great relationships, and have top sales. Why haven't you ever asked me to be the sales manager?" The owner replies, "Well, for one thing, until today, you never asked." Time and again I've learned that lesson, that when you want something, you gotta ask for it. But that isn't easy for everyone. And it's not just a question of having the guts, it's doing it right so it's well received. My guest today is the author of You Don't Ask, You Don't Get, Proven Techniques to Get More Out of Life. Janet F. Williams will tell us why and how we should ask for what we want out of life. That's all coming up right after my public speaking tip of the week here on Full Speech Ahead. So stay tuned.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last! Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We've got to take the neighborhood back.
So my children will not be afraid to say the word AIDS when I am gone.
Each one of you has your own platform. Mine is a stage in a studio. Yours is wherever you are.
Welcome to Full Speech Ahead, the program where we look at communication in all its many facets, with an emphasis on the spoken word. I'm your host, public speaking coach Milo Shapiro from publicdynamics.com. Before we get to my guest today on how to ask for what you want in life, here's my public speaking tip of the week. Technology is often the biggest source of tension when you're going to speak. Between the microphone, the computer, the projector, and the remote, something can easily go wrong. I'm always surprised when speakers insist on bringing their own equipment so they'll feel secure. You know what makes me feel secure? Knowing it's being taken care of by the people putting on the event, the ones who get there bright and early. I email them my PowerPoint in advance, so they are responsible for it. So when I walk in and see my first slide up on the screen, now I am fully present to be cordial and helpful instead of playing amateur AV guy with my own equipment. And if their equipment doesn't work, my laptop is out in the car, my PowerPoint is on a thumb drive in my pocket, and my personal remote is in my briefcase. They only cost about $10 on eBay. They all become backups instead of the first line of defense, taking the stress out from me and giving us a backup in case something goes wrong. Okay, on to this week's interview. My guest today is author and speaker Janet F. Williams. After a long career in high-end sales, Janet now offers her services as a consultant in sales training, business communications, coaching, stress management, and more for both personal and professional development. She's the author of the award-winning book, You Don't Ask, You Don't Get, Proven Techniques for Getting More Out of Life. It was named Best Specialized Instruction Book of the Year by major book reviewer Kirkus Indy, and most recently received the Eric Hoffer Award for Excellence in Independent Publishing. To learn more about Janet, please visit her website, janetfwilliams.com, where you'll also find the You Don't Ask, You Don't Get blog, a great resource for asking tips and techniques, as well as how effective communication helps you grow both personally and in business. You can connect with her on Facebook at the You Don't Ask, You Don't Get page, and you can email her at info@gooddaymedia.com, which I'll repeat later. Janet, welcome to Full Speech Ahead.
Thank you, Milo. It's so fun to be here.
I'm glad to have you. We met so long ago. It's great to have this opportunity to reconnect on a business level. So tell me, I love the title of your book because it is so true. You know, it's one of those things, the older you get, the more you learn. And while it's not so great getting older, one of the things I've really gotten out of life is learning, if you don't ask, you don't get. So what caused you to write the book?
Well, actually, the name of the book, since you brought it up, came from my days when I used to be in the automotive industry. I was in automotive sales and then a finance manager. And working at the dealership, we used to say that you don't ask, you don't get. And it applied just as much to us as salespeople as it would for the customers. And what I found over time is that when I would relate stories, whether it had to do with business or my personal life, people would say to me, I can't believe you asked for that, or I can't believe you got that. And I realized that I have a way of asking that a lot of people really wanted to know more about. And because I'm a writer, I thought, you know what, I've got a book here. And that's what I did. I wrote, You Don't Ask, You Don't Get. And now it's available.
And you brought up something really important there, too. There's two parts to it. It's having the guts to do it, but it's also knowing the best way to do it. Because having the boldness is not going to get you anywhere if you don't ask in the right way. So what's the biggest mistake people make when they ask for something?
I think the biggest mistake people make is they're thinking, what's in it for me? Some people say WIFM, it's short for WIFM, and that's the logical, normal thing, at least the place of where to start is you want to make sure that you're asking for the right thing for yourself and for the right reasons. But really, this is not a one-way street. It's about giving and receiving. And one of the most important things that you can do is don't just stop with what's in it for me. You have to take it to the next step and ask yourself what's in it for them. Because the other person is going to be granting your request. If you don't give them enough of what they want, you're not going to get what you want.
So do you have to set up the thing that you're asking for by first making an offer or something you'll do for them? Or do you couch what you're asking for in terms of how it can be beneficial to them? How do you make it happen?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I like to start with the 7 motivations that influence behavior. These will guide you when it comes to actually starting a conversation. And that conversation should be comprised of open-ended questions, and then use your yes or no questions for tie-downs.
So you've identified 7 specific motivations that influence behavior when you're in the process of asking for something?
Yes. I'll name what the 7 are, and then I'll tell you what they're about.
Okay.
And these are the motivations of why you do what you do, why you ask for what you want, and it's also the same for somebody else. And they don't have to be the same reasons, just know that there are usually several motivations playing into any particular situation.
Okay.
Now, I'll name the 7. They're emotional, physical and time, logical, fairness, spiritual and belief systems, personal, and financial. And now I'll explain what those are. When we talk about the emotional motivation, it's anything that has to do with an emotion. So you do something for somebody because you like them, or you want them to like you, or anything that's having to do with wonder or happiness, security, pride. But then it also includes emotions that you might think of as being negative as well. Fear of feeling foolish, embarrassment, people do things out of guilt. These are all emotions, and so they fall under that emotional category.
So it would be because it makes you feel good in some way or to avoid feeling bad in another way.
Yes, anything that has to do with any emotion is that emotional motivation.
Okay.
Next, with physical, same thing, only from the physical point of view. So a feeling that's a physical feeling would be coolness, warmth, anxiety. If you feel burden, that's a physical sensation. Recreation, sleep, food. And then time-wise, well, that's important too, because people will do things because it's convenient, or there might be some time constraint or an age-related aspect to it. Logically, think of, well, anything that has to do with thoughts. Now we're talking about motivation that has to do with what's going on in your brain. So people go to you because you're the expert, or you go to someone because they're an expert. They're the logical person to go to. And when you hear words like common sense, nonsense, moronic, intelligent, wisdom, reason, these are all under the logical motivation. Fairness has to do with, well, what you think is fair, and what you think is fair is not necessarily what somebody else thinks is fair. And fair, balanced, even, equal, unbalanced, when you hear words like that, or you're talking about, we all have sort of an internal scale that tips us one way or another. That's your fairness motivation. Now, spirituality and beliefs, it could be religious, it could be spiritual, but it doesn't have to be. It could also include ethics and morals, your values. And you might do something because it reinforces a particular belief, or you may actually be doing something for someone else to support their belief. You don't actually have to believe what they believe.
You know, the further you go down in the list, the more I can see the overlap with them. For instance, in that one, some of the ways you were describing spirituality and belief system, I could see that overlapping with fairness, that what's right. It could be almost kind of, not so much a religious, but like a gut feeling of what's good.
Yes, you will frequently find lots of overlap, and that's very important when we get to the next part, because you'll be incorporating these motivations into how you ask and how you reach out to someone, and how they respond to you.
And that's actually what I was going to ask you after this, so that set it up nicely. I know you have 2 left, but we're due for a break, so when we come back from the break, we're going to hear more about the personal motivation and the financial to wrap up the 7 motivations that influence behavior, and then we will get into how you figure out what someone's motivations are. So we'll be back in 30 seconds, right after this.
Got photos that need improvement? Freshen your photo. Old family shots that have gotten damaged? Freshen your photo. Want someone or something removed from a picture? Freshen your photo. At freshenyourphoto.com, we turn the pictures you have into the pictures you want. Add muscle, lose weight, lighten face lines, whiten teeth, fix darker off-color shots. See before and afters from dozens of happy customers at freshenyourphoto.com. That's freshenyourphoto.com.
We are back. If you're just tuning in, my guest today is author and speaker Janet F. Williams, talking about her book, You Don't Ask, You Don't Get, Proven Techniques to Get More Out of Life. So we've just covered 5 of the motivators to figuring out what makes people do things. And you said that there was the emotional, physical and time, logic, fairness, and spirituality and beliefs. Tell us about the last 2, personal and financial.
Yes, personal includes your personal responsibilities that you've chosen to take on. This is your ego. It's also your dreams, your aspirations for your career, your goals, your objectives, and any desires, wants, or needs that have a personal basis. And finally, last but not least, is financial. And most people have a pretty good grasp of what the financial part is about.
Yeah, that'll motivate you when nothing else will some mornings.
Well, and while it's frequently about money, it doesn't have to be about money. It's anything of value. So goods, services, anything related to your budget or some sort of an exchange, trade, or barter, anything that has some value to it. So those are the 7 right there.
And from there, you need to be able to figure, everybody is probably motivated more by one than others. You know, some people are really about making money. For some people, their spirit is really what moves them through anything in the day. So how do you find out what someone's motivations are?
It's important to know who you're working with. You want to make sure that, first of all, that you're asking the right person. And once you've determined that you are, the better you know them, the better your chances for success. So whether you know them well or hardly at all, you can engage in just a regular conversation directed toward what it is that you want by using open-ended questions. And those are questions that begin who, what, where, when, and why, and also how and which. So these kinds of questions will get you answers that elicit more conversation. And it's a way for you to find out by using these words what somebody else's motivations are. Because once you find out what their motivations are, you're going to be able to key into them to get more of what they are going to need so that you can end up getting what it is that you want. Now, it's interesting what you said. I want to get back to something about the financial. It's so funny. Most people, like you say, they might think it's about the finance when really a lot of times it's about emotions. And that's why when you're in sales, they'll tell you, it's not always the money. It's not always the lowest price. It's about creating a relationship with whom you're working with, or, something else other than money. And it's that way whether you're in business, if you have a personal relationship with somebody, they may or may not be actually focused on what they tell you that is the real reason. So the better you know them, the more you'll know what their real motivations are.
That comes up in sales all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've come home from that San Diego County Fair with something, and when I go to actually use it, I realize I bought the salesman again. I didn't really need this thing, or I don't have room for it, but I got so caught up in the relationship. And I would think in the car business that's probably critical, because they start out not wanting to like you, and you kind of have to win them over.
That's true. And it's another good example where people think that finance is paramount when really a lot of times it has to do with emotions or personal feelings. I used to work at a BMW dealership, and the people who came in there weren't there just to buy a car, because obviously you could spend much less and get good transportation. So what were they really buying? Maybe they were buying a little bit of ego, or perhaps it was one of their career objectives that one day they would be able to afford it, and it was proof and reward for themselves. So
hopefully not fairness.
Well, hopefully you are treated fairly once you're there.
Right. No, I meant that you were entitled to a BMW. That's about fairness. But hopefully,
people have different ideas about these motivations. So by beginning your sentences with one of those words, like who, what, where, when, why, how, you're going to be able to start the conversation. If you start with a yes or no question, if you get yes, great. But even there, it doesn't stop.
Yeah, it doesn't allow you to build a relationship at all.
If you start with a no, if somebody says no to you, well, you've already taken a step backward. You're having to come from behind, overcome an objection, when really if you had started out with open-ended questions, you could have avoided that.
That makes total sense. Another thing I find, because so much of what we do involves networking and getting to know people to see where there's potential business, is it's not just finding out what I can do for her so that she'll want to have a relationship so that we can work together. It's sometimes knowing what I want to ask for. If I can find out more about her before I ever ask for anything, I might actually decide to ask for something different now that I know her better. There might be more motivation to go one way than another now that I've asked open-ended questions, like you mentioned.
That's right. That's right. It's all part of good communication.
So what's a good way? I mean, for a lot of people, it's like, okay, this all makes sense, but it's still, how do I get started? What's a good way to ask for something big or important as compared to the smaller things?
Well, as opposed to the size, I think the most important way to get started is to be proactive instead of being reactive. And that's kind of what I've been getting at here. And that is, you need some kind of a plan, especially if you are going to be asking for something large. You want to have an idea of what it is that you want ahead of time and work your way toward that. Now, a lot of times in conversation, we're just being reactive. You say something, I say something, there's no plan, there's no direction, and you could end up not where you want to be. But if you're proactive and you have even just a few minutes to think about it ahead of time, about how you want to ask for what you want or what information you need before you make your request, you're going to be a lot better off than just being reactive.
And is that just kind of thinking out the ideas, or do you actually sometimes plan out the words you're going to say?
Well, it can be both. Sometimes I will actually use the words that I want to say, because little changes in the word use can make a big change in your outcome.
So be actually stopping and going, what words would work more effectively? I mean, I'm in full agreement with you. I just didn't know if that's where you were going. That sometimes the subtlety of one word versus another can be all the difference.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can appreciate this. I mean, after all, I know you because I saw you give a talk on public speaking, and I know that word usage is important to you.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have an example or two in my book here that I've marked. I'm going to read these.
Sure.
Here's some subtle differences. This is just like around the house, you're making a request. You say, can you fix the lamp? This means the person is asking, are you able to fix the lamp?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that isn't necessarily what you need, but that might be how you asked for it.
Chances are you know they can fix the lamp. That's not what you're getting at.
And then, the next question is, will you fix the lamp?
Which
it's
sounds
like,
like
okay, I will, but it still doesn't say anything further. It might be better to say, can you fix the lamp today? So, yes, you know the person can fix the lamp. Will they do it? And will they get it done today rather than at some undetermined point in the future? So that's a real simple example. But I'm going to give you another one. And this would be in a relationship setting if you said, will you forgive me? Well, that's a yes or no question, and the person may or may not want to hear the answer to it. However, if you say, how can I earn your forgiveness?
Oh, what a difference.
That wording assumes you can be forgiven. Now it's just a matter of what you need to do to earn their forgiveness, and that is a crucial distinction.
It almost creates the ability that if the answer was yes, they're probably going to say, there's nothing you have to do, we're fine, and you've got your yes. And if the answer might have been no, then you've opened the door to there being another option.
Well, a lot of times we'll start out with our open-ended questions, and we'll want to tie it down at some point with the yes or no question. And if the person does say no at that trial close, okay, then they're going to tell you what remaining objections are. What do we need to do to get beyond your concern of whatever it was they said the problem was still? Right. So again, through conversation, you find out what their objections are ahead of time, and then you ask a question, or you might do another sample yes or no tie-down question before you go for the real the real big question.
Sure. Work your way up to that. Now, you were talking about conversation, and of course, as a speaking coach, I'm dealing with people's speaking styles, and conversational styles is just another offshoot of that. When we come back from this last 30-second break, I want to talk to you about how you adjust your approach depending on the individual you're speaking with. So we'll be right back after this.
Not another boring conference.
Liven it up with IMPROVentures and the fun of improvisation. Check out motivational speeches and entertainment that get everyone learning through play and laughter. For smaller groups, Teamprovising is our teamwork and communication program with more feedback and fun. Plus public dynamics, keynotes, training, and coaching on public speaking skills. You can be more effective in front of groups. Learn more today.
IMPROVentures, 619-542-0761, or see videos at IMPROVevents.com.
And we're back with the final segment, talking to Janet F. Williams, I should say, in case people just tuned in, at janetfwilliams.com, about her book, You Don't Ask, You Don't Get, Proven Techniques to Get More Out of Life. So when we left off, I started to ask you about how conversation style changes from person to person. So knowing that, how do you adjust for that, or do you?
I definitely adjust for that. Making the other person feel comfortable is very important for you as far as you getting what you want. If somebody is uncomfortable, even if they don't know why, they're going to sense that, and there's a chance that even though they can't even tell you why, you're not going to get what you want. So what I recommend is that you pace the other person, and I'll explain what that is. Pacing is like mirroring the other person, not in such a way that you are mimicking them or making fun of them. It's just a level of comfort. So if this person speaks softly, then you speak a little bit softly. If they tend to speak a little loudly, you do the same. If they tend to gesture a lot, you gesture more than you might ordinarily, because this is what the other person finds familiar. And for you to do it with them makes them feel more comfortable.
You're kind of joining them in their comfort zone, so they're going to relax and feel more open to you.
That's right.
That makes sense. How about...
Yeah, it really works.
Well, you started to go into body language. Is there something, if you're not mirroring the other person, if it's more you talking, how would you use your body language more effectively to convey your message?
Well, for people who do radio occasionally, like I do, one of the tips that's been so beneficial for me is to actually smile while I'm talking.
So important.
Now,
That's a great tip that I'm glad you brought up. I say that to people all the time. You can hear a smile in someone's voice.
Yes. Now, assuming the smile is an appropriate response. If you are being serious, then you want to come across as being serious. And also, not a lot of ums and ers and interruptions, because that makes it sound like maybe you don't really know what you want or what your thoughts are. So if you're on the phone, for example, the other person can hear your hesitation and you'll be conveying that hesitation. So you want to be clear on what your message is in any case.
That makes sense. And if there's something going on in a conversation where someone could misinterpret it, explain it right out. One of the things I got in the habit of doing is saying to people when I'm interviewing them, not interviewing here, but interviewing them as a potential client, if it sounds like there's typing in the background or there's pauses, it's not that I'm on Facebook. I'm taking notes, because I had someone who thought I was kind of like doing other work while I was talking to her. So making sure that we convey I'm really listening.
Well, yes, and it's a good idea to check in with the other person to make sure that they understand what you've said, because what you've said might not be what they comprehended.
Mm-hmm.
And for you to do the same, things like what I heard you say was, and then repeat it in your own words, and then they can say yes or no, that's, yes, that's my point, or no, and then they'll clarify.
Sure, and not to be insulted by that. I had one client who got not a client in this business, but in a previous career, who was like, I already said that. Why are you echoing that? I'm making sure, John, that I understood it correctly. But somehow he found that to imply that maybe he hadn't said it clearly. And it wasn't that. That to just be, I get a good feeling when someone echoes me back. I'm like, yes, that was it. We're on the same page. I know that I can relax and think the communication was clear there.
Well, it's another example of giving and receiving. If you don't have an effective exchange, you're not going to get what you want.
That makes sense. Hey, one last thing to end on. Tell us about a time when maybe most people wouldn't have had the chutzpah to do it, but you asked for something and got it, and people said, how did you get that, Janet? And the answer was, I asked.
Oh, man, there's so many different things. Even when it comes to radio interviews, now it was very sweet you came to me, but a lot of times I'll go to somebody else and I'll ask them, hey, how would you like it if I provided XYZ? And it might not have been on their radar, but once they hear me suggest it, and if I give them a reason why it would be a good idea for them, then there's a good chance that I'll get a yes.
If you lay it out in a way that it makes sense for them, you've just taken half the work off of them, and you end up getting what you wanted anyway.
Yes.
That works out really well for everyone. Hey, Janet, I want to thank you very much for being a guest today on Full Speech Ahead.
Oh, thank you. This was so much fun. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it. I also want to let my listeners know they can learn more about everything Janet's been talking about, this and a lot more, at janetfwilliams.com. And they can get her book by going through that site or directly to Amazon or into any place books are sold in paperback or ebooks. If you've enjoyed this episode live, it'll be on my website for replay by tomorrow to share with others, along with many of the other interviews I've done and posted at fullspeechahead.com. And if you'd like to get notices of upcoming shows of Full Speech Ahead and see more tips on public speaking and creating a more playful life, sign up with my newsletter at miloshapiro.com. You can also check out that same site for information about my coaching and training in public speaking for you or your work team. I'm also available for my team building course, Teamprovising, where we use games of improvisation to look at teamwork, creativity, and communication. And my motivational speeches on risk-taking get the whole audience playing along with those improv games. More again at miloshapiro.com. And with that, I am Milo Shapiro, always moving, full speech ahead. Till next time.